What's good, people? Agent Juice reporting for duty. Allow me to spin ye a yarn of days long past. You see, back in 2008, there was a DeviantArt user known as Nintendo Nut 1 who created a fan comic of Ed, Edd n Eddy.
Night of the Were-Ed.
But don't misunderstand me. I am not here to condemn this work. I am not here to make fun of it. I am here to praise it because it has become somewhat of a cult classic, and in its own charming little way, it is a really fun read. So, let us buckle into our favorite cul-de-sac. Let's go ahead and pal around with our two friends who have the same name as us. Let's go ahead and get bit by a werewolf and turn into a werewolf, and then bite our friend, and then that friend gets bitten by a vampire, and that friend turns into a hybrid, and then the third friend gets to put on a cool trench coat and sharpen plank into a point, and let's take that point to stab the like button and dive into this, but prepare yourselves, for the night is dark and full of many doors, Ed boy. So, of course, before we really dive into it, we first talk about the Speedpaint. This Speedpaint is going to star the Ed boys as they appear in the second installment of Night of the Were-Ed, which is Night of the Were-Ed 2 Solar Eclipse. This is drawn to the best of my abilities as on model to the show rather than Nintendo Nut 1's version of the drawings, because of course those versions are much more, I guess for lack of a better term, anime-ified, right? It's made much more pretty and done in the style, done in a more original style as opposed to the show style. I want to make a note that drawing Ed, Edd n Eddy on model is incredibly difficult, okay? I had an easier time drawing Brock Samson on model, or at least close to on model, than I did the Ed boys, okay? So that was a real challenge. So I had to take the Night of the Were-Ed designs, translate it into Ed, Edd n Eddy style, and kind of make it work. So I hope you appreciate how much work I'm putting into this. But, you know, I'm glad I tackled the challenge. Night of the Were-Ed really is a time capsule looking back into the 2000s. It tells the tale of how the Ed boys and the rest of the kids in the cul-de-sac get spun up in a bunch of supernatural nonsense that involves the Ed boys, or two of them, turning into werewolves, and then Double D turns into a hybrid, and Eddie becomes a vampire hunter, and things happen, and
40 years of darkness, earthquakes, volcanoes,
The dead rising from the grave.
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
This was back during the peak of the 2000s era fan art craze of the internet. This is back in the day when you had all of those Invader Zim fanfics where Dib and Zim would make kissy face. This is back in the day where, of course, you would have all of those DeviantArt, MS Paint, Sanic drawings. So you have all of this angst and edge and teenage hormone just spinning around and being barfed onto the internet worldwide for the first time on a easily accessible and a wide-scale basis, right? The 2000s were kind of the point where all of that could be done relatively easily thanks to things like the website DeviantArt and other things like it. So, of course, the user Nintendo Nut 1 decides to create this little comic. The story in and of itself is very much out of character for Ed, Edd n Eddy. It does not at all feel like a cartoon of Ed, Edd n Eddy. If anything, it kind of feels like an Ed, Edd n Eddy skin put on an original idea, which, to be fair, a lot of fanfics kind of do that. And, you know, it's understandable, especially when creators are so young and they're more interested in kind of like flexing their storytelling chops more than anything. So the story goes that in Night of the Were-Ed, Ed, our big lovable lump, was bitten by a dog and turns into a werewolf, and one night in his werewolf craze bites Double D, and now Double D is a werewolf. So the kids have to get together and figure out, okay, we need to kill the head werewolf in order to cure the Ed boys. Because Double D is clearly the favorite of the author, you can definitely tell in the writing, Double D is able to keep his senses while turning into a werewolf, and is able to help the kids find the main werewolf and fight the werewolf. And, at the last moment, Eddie is able to get the killing blow, right, on the werewolf with a silver cake cutter. In the sequel, Night of the Were-Ed, Solar Eclipse, you have this thing where the solar eclipse makes vampires and werewolves seek each other out and fight each other. Point is that the Kanker sisters are vampires, and they're vampires because it's the same thing with the werewolves. There's like a head vampire, this kind of faceless head vampire who's like this really sexy guy that the Kankers are really in love with, but like Marie and Double D kind of get together and they have like this, like I said, a very out of character like romance, and there's like this really emotional and really angsty and like edgy part where in order to show their love and their trust or whatever, Marie bites Double D, and Double D gains the hybrid powers.
Ed, your story's getting weird.
I know this is very wish fulfillment teenagery, but let's be honest here. Nintendo Nut 1 was probably a teenager when this was made. But the point is, I do appreciate the little nod to Underworld where you get to have the hybrid vampire werewolf. So that's what Double D is now. Anyway, so they decide to have a scrap with the lead vampire. There's a fight that ensues, and of course Marie turns against her sisters and is able to pin down the head vampire so that Eddie, with sharpened plank, can get the double kill. And then you got the third one, right? The third one, All Hallows Eve. Apparently, the existence of an anomaly such as a werewolf-vampire hybrid causes the Halloween season to rip the fabric of the supernatural and the normal open and cause things to go wackadoodle. So anyone who doesn't have special powers or who hasn't been tainted by the powers that be are safe, but I mean, those who haven't been tainted are not safe and they're turned into zombies. But because two of the Ed boys have been vampires and werewolves, the Kankers have been vampires, and Eddie is a monster slayer, and apparently so is Eddie's brother. They have been touched by the taint, and so they're immune to the gobbledygook. Explanation goes here where apparently Double D has to die because he's the anomaly, and if the anomaly dies, then everything turns back to normal, and like this very angsty, tragic end. Eddie has to be the one to kill Double D, and Eddie gets the triple kill. And of course, it's revealed that in the end, everything's great because Odin has been watching over them this whole time, and Odin allows Double D to become like a wolf guardian, and I guess Ed too, maybe, kind of, and I guess Eddie is kind of grandfathered into that too because he's a monster slayer. I don't sweat that this is convoluted because again, it's very much a teen angst passion project. This is something that you would make when you're 16 and you really love Invader Zim, and Underworld is your favorite movie, and you really love Ed, and Eddie, and you secretly ship Double D and Marie because you either project either on Double D or Marie, or both or neither. It is the reason why it's so, despite being, messy, it is so delightfully sincere, and the reason why it has persisted so long. The reason why I even know of Night of the Were-Ed is because the comics and cartoons board on 4chan will story time it every Halloween. It clearly reeks of made by an inexperienced and hormone-riddled teenager, right? And everyone has been that. So this is absolutely not this is not me doing Nelson from The Simpsons and pointing and going, ha ha, because I made stuff very similar. It's a look back on simpler times. That's what it is. I don't think something like this would be made nowadays because the climate is just too cynical. The climate is too cynical and too rigid and too concerned with the sheer power that the internet has of coming down on someone with psychotic fury. Okay? Back in the day, you'd just be called a bad name or a homophobic slur or a racial epithet, and that's it. These days, if you get the wrong people done, they'll dox you, right? They'll come after you. They'll dig up old tweets and attempt to essentially destroy your life. Now, that being said, I don't doubt something like this is probably still being made, but it's the garden aplenty where they were everywhere is not really something that happens these days, at least in this iteration and in this form. This Night of the Were-Ed thing, in short, to kind of wrap everything up, is a snapshot in the past. It is a relic of its time. And because it's so raw, so messy, so clearly out of character of Ed, and Eddie, but at the same time so clearly sincere, right? There's no quips, there's no cynicism, there's no fourth wall breaking. There's no winking and nudging. There's none of that Marvel syndrome crap going on. It is very much raw and real. In its own right, it's kind of beautiful in that way. So anyway, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up here for today. So you people know what to do. If you like what you've seen and you want to see more, go ahead and tickle those sacred buttons. Definitely leave a comment. I would love to hear your thoughts. And of course, always share the video because it's good for the algorithm and it's good for your health. And of course, hit up the Patreon and subscribe star to see my other wistful reminiscence of a relic gone by. And this time I get to cuss like a sailor because El Super Bisto itself is pretty insane. And of course, if you wish to stalk me elsewhere on the interbuts, I always leave up my links here on the screen. And of course, I always make the special mention of minds.com because it's an alternative social media site. Anyway, with all that said, I thank you for spending this time with me. I do hope you all stick around, and until next time, deuces.